Welcome inside this week-ending edition of Big Ten Today. Alongside Anthony Herron, I'm Rick Pisa. We will shortly take you to both Bloomington and Columbus for a check on the respective training camps of Indiana and Ohio State. Now, speaking of training camps, when I talk to former players, guys like yourself, there seems to be a love-hate relationship with fall camp. You're really excited. You love the fact that you're back on the field, right. But about 4 or 5 days in, you hate the fact that you're back to the grind when it's 80, 90 degrees outside.
I mean, especially when you're just hitting the same dude over and over again. Like, all right, this is my buddy, this is my teammate, but I just keep running into him over and over again. I'm tired of hitting you. I want to hit somebody else. So normally, this is around the time in preseason where the coaches try to find a way to mix things up a little bit. Let's have training camp feel a little bit different. Like this gorgeous new studio that we're in right now. This is my first time doing a show from in here. So yes, I've been at the Big Ten Network for a long time. I've worked with you a bunch. But this is a nice way for me to mix things up a little bit. I don't exactly know what to do with my hands, but I'll figure it out.
We're going to figure it out over the course of the next hour. It's always nice to get a little bit of new in your life. Yeah. That does give you a boost. Now, this year, more than other recent years inside the Big Ten, even though it's not the first year of the transfer portal, there is all sorts of new inside the Big Ten. You have the transfer portal, you have 4 new schools, you have new people, places, and personalities. But as we focus on some of the notable new faces in the Big Ten, you look at massive impact transfers. I'll start on the defensive end with Caleb Downs, the 2023 SEC Freshman of the Year at Alabama. Jim Knowles says, we'll welcome you in Columbus. I'm going to slide you right into that secondary, which was one of the best in the country a year ago. And on the offensive end, Bo Nix leaves Oregon. You don't expect the Ducks to take much of a step back with Dillon Gabriel after a great run at Oklahoma coming in to Oregon alongside Ohio State. They are the preseason favorites to win this league, and that's a big reason why. So let's start on the defensive end and the addition of Downs to this Ohio State defense, which we saw take a huge leap in year 2 with Jim Knowles as the DC. He seems to make this secondary, if not the best in the country, certainly one of them.
I mean, that's one of the more remarkable things about the way we view Ohio State, the way we're discussing the Buckeyes coming into the season here. Because a year ago, at this time, after the first season with Jim Knowles leading that defense, there was still some questions. There was still a little bit of scrutiny on whether or not his style of defense would suit championship-level football in Columbus. Now, a year later, after his second season, we view them as one of the top defenses in the country, and they've only bolstered that by the talent that returned in the front 7 as opposed to going to the National Football League. And yes, the secondary was already deep. And now the player who, as I talked to beat writers in Columbus and asked them, who's the best player on Ohio State's deep and dogged Silver Bullet defense this season, every one of them so far has said Caleb Downs. You add that type of talent to the secondary, a guy who can run the alley, a guy who can patrol the secondary in the deep third, and still a very young and ascending talent as well, a guy who has the ability to potentially play on both sides of the football. It's remarkable when you think about the depth that Ohio State has at every level.
That's a crazy statement that he may be the best player on that defense as a sophomore when you think about the guys who could have been in the top couple of rounds of the NFL draft last year, and Jack Sawyer, JTT, his secondary mate, Denzel Burke. Yep. And Downs comes in and is going to be a guy that Jim Knowles and this defense relies on straight from the jump. Same story with Dillon Gabriel. You have a known commodity coming into a program that's really had nothing but success underneath Dan Lanning in a couple of years. Bo Nix, a Heisman finalist a year ago. But this offense is not just about the quarterback. I know Nick's got a lot of love last year, but Tez Johnson comes back as one of the best wide receivers in the country. You have Jordan James back at running back. They're loaded up front as well. Dillon Gabriel walks in as a ready-made guy to an offense that is ready to be even better than it was a year ago.
And this, the quarterback position, the brand of play that we saw through a couple of seasons from Bo Nix and that we all anticipate continuing to see from Dillon Gabriel, this is really the area where I think Dan Lanning as a head coach has combined what we saw not just from Chip Kelly in the past and Mark Helfrich who followed him, where it was an offense that had so many explosive playmakers out there. A lot of scoring would take place, but it was a little bit finesse. And as the sport of college football, as the talent around it began to figure out the spread system, then Mario Cristobal came in and added some physicality. But we did see a dip in production at QB. Dan Lanning, through a couple of seasons, has combined both those elements. They are outstanding on the line of scrimmage. And now, after a couple of seasons of Bo Nix, one of the most veteran, one of the most successful quarterbacks in college football history, now Dillon Gabriel steps in from Oklahoma and has an opportunity to break all of his records, perhaps some of the records in the history of college football. And yes, he is surrounded by playmakers. Getting to talk to him in Indy, I know you saw him in Indianapolis at Big Ten football media days as well. He just seems so composed, so comfortable, so ready for this stage. And he was a guy who was already in the Heisman Trophy conversation last season. So when you have a program like the Oregon Ducks that are in the national championship discussion, the Big Ten title discussion, to be the star of that outfit and already know that he's prepared to handle that stage, it provides comfort to everyone in Eugene.
A lot of movement inside the rosters regarding players, but also with coaching staffs. You have 5 brand new head coaches. It's 6 officially because David Braun starts his first year officially as a Northwestern head guy, but I kind of consider this his second year. But inside the coordinator rooms, there were so many changes this offseason inside the Big Ten. As you look, both sides, offense or defense, where do you think the biggest impact will be made in terms of a coordinator change?
This is, to me, a difficult question because there are programs who really needed to upgrade on a particular side of the football. And there's been new coordinator hires that are going to provide that opportunity. So I considered maybe Dan Lynn and what he can provide to USC, that Trojans defense combining with Lincoln Riley and that USC offense. But to me, when I look at the coordinators all throughout this 18-team conference, top to bottom, Tim Lester is the guy that can make the biggest impact for what he'll provide to Iowa's offense in Iowa City, because we know what Iowa's defense has been historically with Phil Parker. And for a while, the offense was certainly good enough to have them in position for championship level play. They've been able to sustain championship level winning in recent seasons with an offense that's been toward the bottom, not only of the Big Ten, but of college football. And Tim Lester will come in with a veteran group, experience at starting quarterback, at backup quarterback, depth at running back, one of the most veteran offensive lines that Kirk Ferentz has had of recent vintage as well, depth at tight end. So this is an offense that, yes, hasn't put up the numbers or the stats in recent years, hasn't scored at the level that everyone would really anticipate a program that wins like Iowa should be able to muster, but he's got a lot of guys who've played winning football in the past. So assuming health, this has a chance to be a really deep Iowa offense, and just with a few Tim Lester wrinkles that a lot of folks are excited about in Iowa City, this should put Iowa with no divisions, no West division to win. They can still find themselves in the thick of the Big Ten championship.
It's amazing to think that Iowa played for the Big Ten championship a year ago, having the worst yards per play offense in the country.
Astounding.
They also had the best yards per play defense in the country, which certainly helped. And you mentioned having some guys around to help Tim Lester. You look at Iowa's best years. What have they had? Veteran quarterbacks, as long as Cade McNamara can stay healthy, you have that. Really good centers. Logan Jones on the freaks list, a guy that can do a lot of different things, kind of got that figured out. And a really good defense. You don't even have to have that discussion anymore. Phil Parker's in charge. That is an official check mark. We also did have head coaching changes at notable stops. Among all those changes, where's the most impactful head coaching change been made in the 2024 offseason?
I look to East Lansing and Jonathan Smith. I've been able to sort of follow a lot of different touch points along his coaching journey. You know, watched his playing career as well when he was a quarterback at Oregon State. And I've called games when he was an OC at Washington, when he was a head coach at his alma mater in Corvallis, and now him entering the Big Ten. What I'm excited about for Big Ten fans, for Michigan State fans who might have an assumption about what Jonathan Smith and Brian Lindgren, his OC, who's been at multiple stops with him now, what their offense will look like, because he's this West Coast guy, this Pac-12 guy, there might be an assumption that there's a finesse style of play that'll come to East Lansing with him. It's not the case at all. And they do have, amongst a lot of the transfer portal talent that got lost by Michigan State, they've got depth at running back that returns. They've got guys who gain yards in the Big Ten, who've been in critical moments in major college football. They've got an offensive line that, if healthy, should be able to sustain things. But I just like their offensive run system. I've seen it work at multiple stops. And when you have the type of talent at running back that they have, with the run scheme, the outside zone that they love to go to, and then, yes, I'm going to continue to hype up Aiden Childs. I'm trying to control myself and contain the excitement I have, because I don't want to be one of the people who puts too much on his shoulders early. But I do believe they have a potential star at QB as well. So that'll put Jonathan Smith in a position to perhaps surprise some folks this season. But we've seen what he could do in building that Oregon State program. There's a formula he has in place that I believe will really suit Big Ten football in a way that a lot of folks might not recognize.
All you have to do is look at Coach Smith, and you know there's toughness. You look at this guy, and you're like, he didn't play quarterback. With that build, he was a fullback or maybe a blocking tight end. Right. That's the kind of style he played even when he was a quarterback at Oregon State. A lot of transfers in East Lansing this year. As a matter of fact, it's no surprise. You look at the schools with the most transfers, new head coaches leading the way. Indiana, 31 transfer additions. Washington and Jed Fish, 28 after a mass exodus following last season. Michigan State, UCLA also starting the year with more than 20 athletes on their respective rosters. I understand this is the day and age we live in, and Ant, let's not make any bones about it. It has changed college football, in my estimation, more than any other change in the last 10 or 15 years, because now coaches like Jonathan Smith, especially like Jed Fish, you inherit a roster that went to a national championship game, but looks nothing like that. You have one starter back from that national championship roster, and yet you can compete in year one because of the transfer portal.
And this gives coaches the opportunity to reshape their roster in their image. And we've seen it in recent years. You know, you go back to Mel Tucker's second season in East Lansing. It has worked before for some coaches, but it can be difficult because it's a tough needle to thread sometimes, where you're trying to have that combination of adding talent, bolstering just the physical capabilities of your roster, but you also want to build your culture. So when you have guys who've been at this program and that program, and you're trying to combine them into a short space in a short period of time and have them speaking your language, walking and talking like you do as a head coach, it can be difficult to kind of combine that and have it ready in a few weeks or a few months' time by the regular season. But that opportunity is there. And a lot of coaches we're seeing are now trying to do their best to take advantage of that. I mean, even Ryan Walters in West Lafayette, you know, it's his second season, but he's revamped and reshaped the roster from where it was last year. It feels like he's got a product to put on the field this season that's just going to be more physically formidable than the team he inherited last year.
Well, and the new coaches can, of course, rely on their old rosters. You mentioned Aiden Childs coming with Jonathan Smith from Oregon State to Michigan State. Most certainly, Jed Fish did that with a couple of guys from Arizona. And Kurt Cignetti trying to do that, but on a slightly different level, because you're bringing guys from James Madison, as good as the Dukes were, a fairly fledgling FBS program, coming to Indiana. And still, you know Cignetti, hearing him talk, he's not going to back away from anything.